Hello, today is April 18th, 2022, and my name is Ciria Mendoza, and I will be, you know what, I need to connect my AirPods. I knew there was something missing. Okay. All right. Hello, today is April 18th, 2022, and my name is, oh my gosh, okay. Hello, today is April 18th, 2022. My name is Ciria Mendoza, and I will be interviewing Mrs. Leslie Galvan for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Hereafter will be abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please note that Mrs. Oh wait, no, I need to let them. Okay. Okay, we're gonna start now. Hello, can you hear me? No, you're muted. I probably.
Hi.
Hi.
It's okay.
Okay. So I probably should have told you before. Oh, you don't need to have your camera on if you don't want to. It's okay.
Okay, cool.
If you don't want to. Okay. I'm gonna, at the end of the meeting, I'll like cut all of this out, but I'm supposed to record it. But you can have your audio and you don't have to have your camera on. I'm sorry, I cannot speak. Okay. So
it's fine. I brushed my hair.
Hi, how are you doing today? How did everything go? Okay, so at the start, I'm gonna I have like a little speech that I have to say before we start with the actual interview.
Okay.
But I thought I was leaving before I let you in. I actually don't know what I'm doing, so please excuse me if I get nervous or anything.
It's just me.
I know, but it's the idea that I have to turn this into like official people.
Got it.
I'm like, oh no. Like with you, like, I don't care, like we're comfortable, like it's fine. But then like I have to like give this to someone bigger and that's scary. So,
yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna do a little thingy. Okay. So I say the little thingy and then I'll ask you a couple questions and then I'll ask you like the actual interview question. Hello, today is April 18th, 2022. My name is Ciria Mendoza, and I will be interviewing Mrs. Leslie Galvan for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Mrs. Galvan, that this interview will be placed at the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and is shared with the Voices Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we will also talk about it. The University Library Special Collections and Archives will archive your interview along with any other photographs and documentations that you are willing to share. UTRGV University Library will retain copyright or non-exclusive rights to the interview and other materials you donate to the Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV. Because we're conducting this interview, we are not conducting this interview in person. I need your consent. I need to record you consenting to make sure you, agree with our interview procedures before we continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. So question number 1. Do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and your materials at UTRGV University Library?
I do.
Next question. Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
I do.
Next question. Do you agree to allow UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
I do.
Do you grant do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archive consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center and the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the video on the internet?
I do.
As you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We use the information from the pre-interview form to help in the research. The entirety form is kept in a secure server at UTA, University of Texas at Austin. I don't know if I was supposed to. Before Voces sends it out, we would have stripped any contact information for yourself or family members so that it will not be a part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Library. The final two questions are what I just talked about. So first question, the next question is, do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at UTRGV University Library Special Collections?
That's okay, yes.
And on occasion, UTRGV's Special Collections and Archives Voices receive requests from journalists who wish to contact their interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news and outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone number, your email with our journalists?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you for your consent. This means a lot to the people. Now, let me retrieve. I can't find the other thing. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm very nervous. Okay. So now is the actual stuff. Okay. So I can have this somewhere here. Okay. Mrs. Galvan, thank you for your time. I want you to know that your story is very important to the project, and since throughout the pandemic, you were seen as an essential worker at the Brownsville Community Fellowship Church at Brownsville, and you had to juggle as well as going to school and taking care of your mother. I know you have a lot of meaningful stories that would be helpful, especially, well, not be helpful, but would be very interesting to hear about as you had all these experiences during the peak of the pandemic. Before we talk about everything that happened, can you share a bit about yourself and who you are and who you would like to be known as?
Well, my name is Leslie Galvan. I am 44 years old. I live in Brownsville and I work for BCF Church. I also am going to college and attending school right now, just part-time. I also take care of my disabled mom, and she lives with me and my husband. I own a small business. And so all of those things take up most of my time on a daily basis. And I think that's it.
So the first question I want to ask you is, can you share a memorable story about how you first learned or heard about COVID-19, whether it was through the television on the news or through social media or however you found out about it?
So right around, I think it was probably in February, I was also caring for my niece during that time. I had her for a year because my sister was sick, and so I was taking care of her. It was Sunday night and she was not feeling well, and she had school the next day. And so I took her to the doctor, and they told me they were going to swab her for flu and for the COVID-19. And I was like, what's COVID-19? And they're like, oh, it's this virus. And I'm like, okay, but I didn't know, I hadn't really seen or heard anything yet. I think I may have heard a little bit about it, but it didn't seem like as big a deal. It sounded like it was just kind of like a flu. Mm-hmm. So they swabbed her for the flu and COVID, but she came out positive for the flu. And so then we came home. They said she can't go to school for a week. And I was like, wonderful, I'm going to have a child with me. So I didn't go to work for a week because I took care of her for that week. We had also just on Saturday before that been to a 70th birthday party. And it was a small party, but there was a lot of us there. And a lot of like, we were like 8 or 9 to a table. So later on, like after that week was over, my niece so after that week is when COVID really became a big deal on the news, at my job. And we were trying to figure out what we were going to do, because it was starting to ramp up here in Brownsville. People were starting to get sick and people were starting to show symptoms of COVID-19. So the week after my niece was sick, I got sick, but I didn't have COVID. I had the flu as well. And then I was fine. And then it was like a really big deal. We, church shut down, and our office, we started working from home. So I really didn't hear about it on the news. I heard about it from my job. My pastors were very concerned about it. And so they said, we're going to see what we can do, because we don't want to have to shut down church, but if we need to, then we will. And so then we started working from home. And so that's kind of how I heard about it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for answering that. Did you hear about like any rumors? Like, I know you heard from other people about it, but were there anything that I guess like scared you about COVID during that time?
When I look back at it now, I don't think it was a rumor, but they were saying that people with comorbidities were really being affected. So people who were diabetic, or people who were obese, or people who had high blood pressure, or just other things wrong with them other than like being healthy. Like they were people who were really being affected by COVID-19. And my mom is a diabetic. I'm a diabetic. And my mom is also a stroke victim. So I was very concerned at that point. And it was just the things that people were saying, and I wasn't really sure. And everything that I looked up seemed legit. But that's probably the only thing. And it was one of the things that scared us a lot.
Thank you for that. Do you remember what it was like for you during the stay-home orders, or do you have any stories about that stood out to you looking back on it now?
I remember being afraid, but not like super afraid. I remember hearing that. I'm going to have to put you on pause for a second because my dog is going crazy. Hold on. Heard another voice.
I was like, whoa, who's that?
Yeah, my dog heard another voice and was like, who's talking? Who are you talking to? There has to be somebody else in the house. Can you give me the question one more time? I'm sorry.
Yes, no worries. Are there any stories that you remember during like that stay-at-home time during 2020 that like you could share that stood out or stand out to you now looking back on it?
So like my own personal story, or like stuff I saw online or heard on the TV, or
whatever you're comfortable, whatever stands out to you more, like just any stories at all.
Personally, I have a lot of, it's going to be something that I remember forever. Like we did church from home. We put together church services from home, and my husband plays the guitar and I sing. So we led worship from our living room. We would record our time on our iPhones and then send it to our audiovisual person, who then got it all together for Sunday service, as well as for our Friday services, which is Celebrate Recovery. So that's something I will never forget. That's one of those stories that I don't know, like I think about later in the future, like people will be like, well, you did church service from home? Well, yeah, we were locked down. We were in our homes. We weren't supposed to go anywhere. My husband was also an essential worker. So I will also remember being given a letter from our pastor stating that I was an essential worker. We also had a name tag that had our name on it where we worked, stating that we were an essential worker, in case we needed to go out. We have older people or people who live alone in our church. And so we would if someone needed something, then we could go grab it and take it to them. Like if it was rolls of toilet paper, because, toilet paper was non-existent for a little bit. Or if we heard of someone being sick, then we could go and take them food to their doorstep. So that's another thing. It was kind of like being in a movie, one of those weird sci-fi movies, and where, you weren't allowed to go anywhere. And I mean, you were, but we also had a curfew. And so we had to be home by a certain time. So that's another story. But COVID also, some good things came out of COVID. And one of the stories for me is that I ended up back in college. I hadn't been to college in 17 years. But of course the college was still functioning. So, but they went to, I think it might've shut down for a little bit, but then summer school was coming up. And so they were offering like scholarships for you to go to school. I hadn't been to school in 17 years. And I was like, well, if I'm going to be at home working from home, then I've got to do something else. Cause I mean, at the time I was a receptionist at the church. So all I was doing was answering phone calls and they were forwarded to my cell phone, but I probably got 8 or 9 calls a day tops. And then what was I going to do with the rest of my day? So I decided to go back to school, and I'll get to tell that story someday to not grandchildren, because I don't have children, but my nieces and nephews, so.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Can you, sorry. Over the last couple of years, what news media or social or news media or other sources do you rely on to keep you informed about COVID-19, and why do you prefer these sources to keep you
informed? Fox, just because I was told that it gave unbiased news, and then I have a pastor he doesn't come to our church anymore because he moved away, but he is very he had a lot of unbiased information that he was able to come by. And so he would give us a lot of that information. And then whatever information he gave us, I would go look up to see oh, well, what is, I'd get more information. But I mean, because I did not take anything that came on of Facebook as true. If I saw something, if something came up, I was immediately researching it, because I was like, oh, I'm going to make sure that's true before I let my mind believe it, because it was a scary time. And so, I mean, I tried not to watch too much news, and a lot of it was just kind of doing my own research. And I mean, literally, if someone said something about COVID, I would go research it. And it was Fox News. I did watch the local news as well. And also Judge Eddie Trevino would come on, once a day, telling us what was going on, giving us numbers and figures and all these things. And so since he's local, I tended to believe what he had to say. So.
And how did, I know we talked a little bit about the curfew and stuff. Did that make a huge difference in your life, or before the pandemic, where you already kind of had a subconscious curfew, or did you have to make huge changes in order to follow that curfew?
Didn't have to make huge changes. My husband sometimes would have to close, he was a manager at Office Depot, and so he would have to close sometimes, so he wouldn't get home until 10:30, 11 o'clock. So it wasn't too late. And I was always home before. I mean, I wasn't going anywhere unless I had to. And my mom wasn't going anywhere unless she had to. She's a dialysis patient as well. So she had dialysis Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, but she was usually home by 6:30 or 7. So it didn't really have a huge effect on us.
Do you feel that you and your family have the same belief of COVID as you did at that time, or has your view of it changed?
No, I think I still have the same view. It is, I actually got COVID, but not the original first variant of it, that first big punch where a lot of people died and there was no vaccines and there was nothing for it. But I did get sick over Christmas just of 2021. And after that, I was like, okay, well, I didn't get as sick as all these other people did. And I have a lot of comorbidities as well. So my belief is still the same. Like, did I believe that it was deadly? Yes, because we lost family members and we lost friends. We lost people in church. I sang in a span of 10 days, I sang at 4 funerals, and all people who had passed away from COVID. So it was real to me. It's still real to me. Every time the news says something about a new variant coming out, I'm like, wonderful. How bad is this one going to be? But it seems to, as each variant comes out, it's highly contagious, but not as deadly, and with the vaccines and such, which I'm not like completely convinced that the vaccine works. I mean, I don't know. I get a flu shot every year. My mom gets a pneumonia shot and a flu shot and those kinds of things. I've grown up being vaccinated, never really took into consideration how they work in my body. But I was glad that I had been vaccinated before I got COVID, because there were still people dying at that point, or at least that's what the news said, so yeah.
And speaking on the topic of vaccination, was it easy to get a vaccine, or was it like more difficult for you? And did you end up getting all 3? Like, did you get the first, the second, and the booster? Or
so getting a vaccine. So at first I didn't want to get vaccinated. And I think a lot of people thought that way. A lot of people were like, well, what's even in this? I mean, you came up with a vaccine so quickly. My mom was vaccinated through her dialysis center. So I didn't and she was the one I was worried about, because she is elderly and she's a stroke victim and she has diabetes and high blood pressure and congestive heart failure. She has all these things that are wrong with her. So really, the time that we spent being isolated was for her, no one came to our house, those sorts of things. But she was able to get her vaccine, and she got all 3 of them at her dialysis center. So we didn't have any trouble getting her vaccines. When we finally decided to get the vaccine, it was probably about 6 or 7 months after it had already come out. And my doctor, who I trust, she was offering it in her office, but she did tell us, I don't know if you need it. And she says, but I'll get with you the more information that I get, because she herself hadn't even taken it. She wasn't sure yet. And I trust her. So once she had decided that it was safe, and our pastor also was part of a trial for the Moderna vaccine. And once we had heard back from him and seen results and things like that, then I was more okay with getting it. So then it was hard to get the vaccine at that point, because we would have to get onto the CVS website to schedule. And there was never any times, so we're getting on at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to schedule a vaccine, because that's when they would release the times. And so I was able to do that. I don't even remember what the dates were, but I think it was like March. I'm going to say it was like March of 2021 when we got those vaccines. And I have all 3 vaccines at this point. I've gotten all 3. I just got my booster in March of this year, because I had COVID in December of 2021, and I received a COVID infusion. And so after I got that infusion was supposed to help me recover quickly, and also not feel the symptoms as badly. And so I was able to get an infusion. And then after I got that infusion, they said we had to wait 3 months before we could get our booster. So I just got my vaccine in March, the 3rd one.
How did you, I guess, get the infusion? Because I've never heard of it.
So a friend of ours a very, very close friend of mine, her friend works in that clinic where they were doing the infusions. It was in Harlingen. And that was, so a bunch of us got sick. We were at a graduation party and a whole bunch of us got sick. And her friend, well, my friend got sick, and then her friend was like, hey, we have infusions and these are supposed to help. Apparently at that point, that variant of COVID was very contagious. So everybody was getting it. You mean you walked into a room with people and you were there for too long, like you were going to get it. So they called her and then they said, we have spots. So if you have friends. So my friend, of course, was like, hey, we've got a spot if you want to come. And so I went to Harlingen and it was an IV infusion. Took about, I don't know, like an hour. So yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And did you feel any symptoms from any of the shots, or were you just fine?
My first shot, I had nausea and my arm hurt and I was tired. So that first shot, I mean, we came home, I got it on a Sunday right after church. So we had lunch, I got my shot and I came home and I was feeling a little nauseous. So I went to sleep. And then I was fine. My arm hurt for like a day after that. And then I was fine. My second shot, I didn't feel anything. I went to work the next day. And then my third shot, I felt a little bit nauseous and I had a headache and that was it.
And you mentioned you had not the one of the calmer COVID
the variant,
whatever, yes, COVID variant.
Yeah.
How did, even though you had not that many symptoms from the vaccine, how did that compare to having actual COVID? Like, how did you feel having COVID?
I had a headache and I did have a fever. And I never get headaches. Like for all my life, I've never had issues with headaches or migraines or like that. So I had a really bad headache. I did get a fever. I very rarely get the flu. I'm not normally, my immune system's pretty high. So I very rarely get sick. I do have asthma, like allergy induced asthma. So it did spur that up for me. So I did have a cough. I still kind of have that cough and I lovingly call it the COVID cough. Because there's nothing, I don't have anything in my lungs. I don't have an infection. I don't have anything, but that cough is still there. But that's also part of my allergy induced asthma. Like for years before, anytime I got sick, I would have a cough for months. So I know it's also part of that for me. And so other than having a really bad headache and having a fever for like 3 days, and being very tired while I had COVID, that was that. After I recovered from COVID, the next couple of weeks were rough. I remember like being in the living room with my family and my husband, because my husband did not get COVID. I was the only one in my house who got COVID. I got up to help him make dinner and I was chopping vegetables and I was standing there for like maybe 5 or 6 minutes and I was super winded. Like I had to sit down, just from chopping vegetables. And even just taking a walk to throw the trash was, like I was winded. And so that was probably like 2 weeks after, like for 2 weeks, I was exhausted all of the time. But that eventually went away as well. So
that was very so I don't. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm trying to be like professional, but I like hearing your stories. So it's like wow. So these next set of questions are going to ask about how COVID has affected your family, your career, and like your day-to-day life. I know we've already kind of covered some of them, so I apologize if I'm going to be like jumping in and out, jumping around. So, and if, like you mentioned earlier, like if you don't feel comfortable answering the question, you can totally just say skip, and that's not a problem. So earlier you mentioned that you live with your husband and your mom, and you take care of her. How did having to stay at home and that whole situation, how did that affect how you guys live together, if that makes any sense? Like your relationship, did or any of that, if you feel comfortable sharing? Like, how did that affect versus before having to stay home and having to do all of that? What was the differences between that?
Well, we were, I say lucky, but we were blessed with a great provider for my mom. And she was also very careful about, she didn't go anywhere except home and work being my house. So she became part of what we called our COVID bubble. And it, our COVID bubble for us were people that we knew where they were, who they were around. They were careful about who they spent time around. And so she, other than going home, she didn't go to the stores. Like everything became curbside. And that's just how it was for all of us. She took really good care of my mom. So she would come to work from 9 to 3. And then, that gave me time to like work if the phone was ringing or if I had to do stuff for work on the computer. My husband, of course, was still going to work. So my relationship with my mom didn't change too much because she had the same care, even though I was home. My husband, of course, being an essential worker, and he was out almost every day. He was at work. He would come home. He would come through the garage. He would strip down and go straight to the shower. And, that way if he was carrying any COVID on his clothes, then he would leave it in the garage, So I guess like it did put some strain on the family in that like, we had to be really careful because of mom, he didn't want to get sick. I didn't want to get sick. We didn't want to get my mom sick. So it did put some strain on us in that we were always, who's got the hand sanitizer? Where's your mask? We couldn't go anywhere without any of those things. And for my mom too, like she needs other people to care for her. So like if she went to dialysis and came back, we had to change her clothes. We had to make sure she had hand sanitized, like washed her hands. And sometimes she would be waiting for me, like she would ring the doorbell because she was on transportation. So they would drop her at the door. I would open the door and she's got her hand in her mouth. And I'm like, take your hand out of your mouth. Like, so it's kind of like living with a kid. But I mean, I guess it put just that extra pressure in that we had to be careful. And so it did sometimes make us a little short with one another. But other than that, I mean, I feel like it brought us closer because we did have to spend time together. And I know a lot of people don't like spending time with their family, but my family does enjoy our time together. But also being just concerned about like, is your job going to shut down? Like my husband worked, in retail. So was his job going to shut down? What were we going to do if he didn't have a job? The same for me, like working for a church, like if people don't give to the church, well, then people don't get paid in the church. And so it was one of those like, well, no one's going to church and everyone's scared about COVID. So there was a little bit of like that in the air, just kind of worry. But I mean, it didn't really cause like any major issues or anything like that. My husband still continued to keep hobbies as well as I did. And so we didn't have to be together 24/7. Like he would play video games and I would go to my other room and craft, or go do homework and I had a set space for that so I could get away from everything else. So.
Thank you. So you mentioned, you brought up like hobbies and stuff. So for your small business, how was that affected by, since there wasn't any markets, there wasn't anyone going out for any of that? Could you like give a little more information on like your small business and how you kind of thrived through COVID?
Yeah. So my small business, it didn't become a small business until COVID. So I was already, I say it's my therapy, but I make, jewelry out of genuine leather. And it's always kind of been my time for myself. And so I could go into my craft room and I could make earrings or make bracelets or, whatever I was making. During COVID, I started going to school. And so I was like, well, I was still selling jewelry online. People were still wanting to buy jewelry, which was strange to me because no one's going anywhere. You can't go out, but people were wearing their jewelry because they were dressing up for Zoom calls. They were still having to have meetings online. So it was still kind of a necessity for people. So I did a lot of, I would post stuff online, people would order, I would go drop it off curbside. So I would go or do contactless drop off. I would drop off at their home, or they would come pick it up at my front door, that sort of thing. So my small business started during COVID, kind of officially. I was able to, I went to the courthouse to do all my paperwork to make myself legal. And there was no line. It was wonderful. I had to wear my mask to get in the building and take my temperature and all that, but there was no one there. So I didn't have to stand in a line. And so as it went from hobby to small business, and there were no markets, but I was doing all of my selling online. I was doing videos. I was talking to people. I was just posting things online, and everyone was spending all their time on social media. And I think too, it was for some people, coping was shopping. So people were willing to buy things from local vendors. And they're like, I'm helping someone in my community, who maybe needs this to survive. And for me, my small business at that time was paying for school. So, and like my school books and stuff like that. So it didn't, I feel like it thrived. I probably had one slow month, from 2020. No, I'm lying. From 2020 to like 2021, let's say that year. I probably had like 2 or 3 slow months where I made less than $500 for the month. But I mean, that's a lot, so it didn't hurt my small business. I feel like if anything, it helped build up it helped just kind of build a reputation with people at that point. So
that's really cool. So, and also as well as speaking like on school and stuff, how are you managing your, like, because you work full time and you go to school part time and you do small business, like what are you going to school for, and like how do you, like, I guess, plan out your day like during all of this?
Mm-hmm. So I'm a social work major. I was going to TSC, Texas Southmost College. I started in June of 2020, and then I graduated in December of 2021 with my associates. So I have an associate's in social work, and my day looked like getting up in the morning. I had myself on a schedule. There was this part of my brain, and other people tell me that they don't have that part. But so I think it's weird, but I had this thing that I was like, I'm not going to sit around and do nothing. Like, I'm not going to, I'll be in my pajamas and I'll watch TV or, whatever, but I'm not going to do nothing. And so I planned my day out, and I knew I had to be up by like 9 or 10, take a shower. All of my classes were asynchronous online except for one. So I didn't have a specific time to meet. I just got to work on my own. And so I would set a schedule for myself so that I could get things done. And so I would do that in the morning for a few hours. If the phone rang for work, then I would answer that. And anything that I had to do administratively online, I would do. And then after lunchtime, then I would go back to like work, like schoolwork. My mom, like I said, my mom had a provider during most of the day, so I didn't have to worry about that. Work ended at 5:00. I would do some schoolwork until about 6:30, from 5 to 6:30. And then I focused on my family. So making sure dinner was ready and taking care of my mom. And then after dinner, I would work on jewelry. And so it was just kind of one of those like, okay, I had to set a schedule for myself, because if I didn't, I wasn't going to get anything done. So.
So you mentioned your niece before. You mentioned how she was with you that first couple of weeks. How did you go about taking her back, or how did that kind of adapt to COVID, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. Well, I had to take her. So after that week of being sick, the next week was spring break for Los Fresnos. So the week of spring break for her, I knew that, I mean, she lives in Corpus, so it's 2.5 hours away. So I just knew that if I went early, I would be fine. And we didn't stop anywhere. We literally, from Brownsville, I took snacks from home. We got in the car. We drove the 2.5 hours. We got to my sister's house. I dropped her off. My sister wasn't going anywhere either because she was immunocompromised because she's a dialysis patient. Her kidneys are failing. And so I took her home. I used the restroom there. She sent me home with snacks and I didn't have to stop anywhere. She came straight back home. So it was like one shot. There wasn't going to be any stopping anywhere to use the bathroom or touch things that could possibly give me COVID, that kind of thing. And so I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. And have you seen her since, or has it been?
Yeah, no, I've seen her since. Once like the travel orders were like over and stuff, she was one of the first people we went to see in person because we did talk to each other through Zoom and through FaceTime, that kind of stuff. After I dropped her off, she actually came. That was in March. And then my sister got sick. So during the summer, she came for a couple of weeks. And we couldn't go anywhere either. That's really hard, like having a 7-year-old in your house who, doesn't have anything to do. We played outside in the water, like I put sprinklers outside and things like that. So we did get to see her once, and then I took her back I took her back after my birthday. That was August, right before she was going to start school again. And then I think I had her again, like in September, like I had her for a couple of weeks because they were doing online school and my sister was, of course, not well. She had just had a baby. She was a dialysis patient. She was doing dialysis at home. And so she couldn't care for her. She couldn't help her do her schoolwork. She's 7. She didn't know how to use a computer. Now she does. She didn't know how to use a computer. So, and I was home. I was like, just let me go get her so that I can homeschool her and you don't have to worry about it. So we did have her a couple of times. I did see her a few times, but again, it was just a one shot, like to her house, pick her up, come home, that kind of thing. So.
Thank you. Give me a second. Okay, yes, I think I can answer this one. Looking back, from now to back to like the first wave of COVID, is there anything that you have done differently, or anything you wish I don't want to say you didn't do, but like something you would have changed, knowing what you know now, kind of thing?
I don't think so. I feel like we did a really great job of not getting the major Delta variant. And I don't think that there's anything that I would do differently. I mean, I feel like we did a great job of taking care of the family, of keeping ourselves healthy. I don't think that there's anything that I would do different.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for answering the question. You mentioned that your sister was, your sister lives in Corpus and everything, but did you have any traditions that you would do, like, I guess like Christmas or like Thanksgiving, that you had to not do during COVID? Is there anything that you like? How did you, I guess, adapt to that? Like any traditions that you would do, like you couldn't do them during 2020. So what did you do like instead, I guess, if that makes sense?
So Christmas 2020, what did we do? Well, we have a normal, like every year we do something called Christmas Adam. And so Christmas Adam is the day before Christmas Eve because Adam came before Eve. And usually that day is a day that we would have a party at our house and have all of our friends over. So we didn't get to have that. We still, my husband and my mom and I still did, we made a special dinner for ourselves, and we still kind of did the tradition without our friends. We opened a present on that night and we're with each other. And of course, Christmas, we didn't get together with our family. We normally get together. Christmas Eve, we spend with my husband's family. And then Christmas Day, we spend with my mom's family. So we didn't get to do any of that in 2020. In 2021, I got COVID. So we had Christmas Adam, and that's where everybody got sick. So we didn't know that I had been around. Actually, a few of us at my party had been around someone that had COVID earlier in the week. And so at that point, at the end of 2021, people were a little more lax about COVID. Like people were not wearing their masks as much. And, you were vaccinated already for the most part. So we had our annual Christmas Adam party. And there were probably 1, 2, 3, 4 of us. There were 4 of us who had been exposed and we didn't know. We were all at the same graduation party together. And the person who was throwing the party had COVID. She didn't know she had COVID. She thought she just had the flu because at that time, COVID wasn't even a thing. Like it was a thing, but it wasn't here. And so after she tested positive for COVID on Christmas Eve. So I had my party the day before. And then Christmas Eve, she called me and said, "Hey, I think you really need to get tested because I tested positive for COVID and so did a lot of people at the party." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So then I had to call all the people at my party and be like, "Hey guys, I'm about to go get tested." And there was this thing, and I knew I had COVID because Christmas Eve morning, I woke up super congested and my throat hurt. And I was like, man. And I was with my husband the whole day. Like we were sitting in a car together. We went to get tested together. He tested negative. I tested positive. He did not get COVID at all. So I was sent to one side of the house and he lived on the other side of the house with my mom. So we didn't get to do Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, or New Year's with anyone. So those traditions for 2021 sucked because I was in a room. And then right after New Year's is when they announced that you didn't have to do 10 days or 14 days. You could just do 5 days of isolation. But I did 5 days of isolation and I tested and I was still positive. So I was like, I'm just going to stay isolated. So.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess after that, like, after getting COVID and everything, like, have you guys, like, I guess, returned back to, I guess, a more sense of like normalcy after like getting over that situation?
Yes and no. I don't so at work I don't have to wear a mask. So that's normal. Like we're at my job, my job place, we don't have to wear masks anymore. We're all vaccinated, so they say. But they do say if you're feeling ill, don't come to work. If you have a fever, we've had, if we go into work and we're not feeling well, we have COVID tests there, take a COVID test because then we've all been exposed,
Yeah.
But so at work, it's kind of normal, but there's still that, like when someone's got the sniffles or someone's coughing, we're like, what's going on? I don't wear a mask to go anywhere unless there's a sign that says I have to wear a mask. So I keep a brand new box of, I've probably got I had 100 masks in each one of our cars. So that if we need them when we go somewhere, a lot of places require them when you walk in, but then once you're sitting down, you can take them off, which I don't understand. Because it's like once you sit down, COVID stops ruminating the room. But we still take them with us because we're gonna follow people's rules. We're not about to be rebellious or disrespectful. So yes and no. And I still keep hand sanitizer in my car. So when I go to the store, when I get back to my car, even while I'm in the store, I'm very self-conscious about touching my face or touching my mouth or touching my nose or my eyes while I'm in the store because I'm touching all the things. So when I get to the car, the first thing I do is hand sanitize. And when my mom's with me, I make her hand sanitize. Like, for example, today we went to the doctor's office. We got down from the car, got her into the doctor's office. Real cool, no masks. This is the day and night clinic. everyone's wearing a mask, and we walk in without a mask, and they're all staring at me. And I was like, I'll be right back. I go get a mask. So I ran to the car to get us both masks because she didn't have one on either. We went in to see the doctor, and then when we came out, we got to the car and made her hand sanitize. I was like, I forgot there was a bunch of sick people in there. Like, let's not do that, So yes and no, we're still doing some of the things that we were doing during, the main COVID stuff.
Thank you for sharing. So this next, oh wait, no, hold on. Yes. Okay. So this one is going to be, this next little section is going to be basically focusing on your role in the worship team, and just like basically how that works. You mentioned that you sang. So is there like anything else like you sang on the worship team? Like, is there anything else like you want to like, I guess like give background information to those who like don't really know your role or anything?
Yeah. So I sing at my church on the stage, probably about 12 feet away from people and about, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet up off the ground above people. I've been singing on my worship team for almost 20 years. I've been singing since I was 4. So, I don't know. What else did I say? What else? Is that what you're looking for? Like background,
Yeah,
like I sing to Jesus.
Yeah. But it was just like an introduction. What is it? I guess, what is it like? Like what procedures do you guys do? Like, how do you practice, and how is your practice like practicing and performing? You mentioned that you guys did it from home. So how did that, I guess, affect, since you guys couldn't practice together, how was that affected by the stay-at-home orders and everything?
It wasn't. I am part of a team of amazing musicians who fine-tune their craft on a daily basis. So because they love music and they're passionate about it. So, one of the things that, we did church from home. And so several of us are married to musicians. And so there was somebody who played the piano or somebody who played the guitar. Like for me, my husband plays the guitar. So we were able to just like, hey, we need 4 songs for a Friday night. And he's normally our worship leader on Friday night. So we put together the music. We would do it on Tuesday, and that way we could send it on Wednesday so it could be edited and then put on the screen. We had to do a Christmas service, I being in isolation. So several families did things. So like our family did a guitar and vocal piece. Another family did a piano and vocal piece. Another family did guitar and piano, and then 3 of them singing. So, we were, and then it was just all pieced together. Now coming back to being in the worship center, like we're back in person. Like I said, I'm part of a team who is just amazing. So we don't worry about that. We've never worried about it. We come together and we get there at 8:30, 8:45 to start practice at 9:00. And we get to rehearse from 9 to about 9:30. And then we get ready to do music for our 10:00 service. So we've just been trained. Your part. You need to know your part before you get here so that we can just put it together. And so we get that 30 minutes to kind of make it mesh before we have to do it live.
That's super cool. Thanks for sharing. Can you share with me some of your like favorite moments of work? I know you mentioned that there was families of musicians and everything, but is there like a specific memory that you just kind of like hold to your heart type of thing?
Yes, it was the first time that we got to get together in person. So we had been like, our team had been doing stuff individually at our homes and then sending those recordings in to our AV person so they could master them up to put them online. But for Mother's Day, we were able to come together the week before. I think it was like probably a Tuesday night or a Monday night. We got to come together in the worship center. We sat 6 feet apart from one another, and our AV team set up so that we could all record. So we had an acoustic player and an electric player, a bass player, all the vocals had their own microphone. They had it all set up. We had like these wooden panels behind us so that everything looked the same. So that for Mother's Day, we did this song together, The Blessing. And it was super cool. That's probably a video that you're going to need for this because it was awesome. And we all sang together. And it was kind of like when you looked at the screen, it was almost like the Brady Bunch. And it was just super cool. And it was a very exciting moment for all of us because we got to be together, you know, but we were still practicing all of the 6 feet away from each other kind of thing. If you were sick, don't come. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
I need to look for that one. I remember that. So we were like, oh my gosh, you guys are in person. People saw the wooden panels. I was like, whoa. I probably have to look through the pictures for them.
Yeah.
I have to edit this part out, whatever. Anyways, you mentioned that you guys had shut down, like BCF had shut down, and how did you go about, I guess, or was like the church like just like completely closed off, or like was there somebody going in there and like, you know, like making sure like it didn't like blow up in dust, or like were the facilities like used, I guess, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. Well, so our church did shut down. No one worked there that I'm aware of. We did offer our church to our fire department, our first responders here in town. And so because they were finding that first responders were the most, of course, susceptible to getting COVID, and they were worried about going home and taking COVID to their families, you know, especially because there was a period like you could be exposed to it and not know you had it. And then you went home to your family members and you didn't want your kids to get COVID and you didn't want your wife to get COVID. So we offered our church as a place for anyone who had been exposed for them to stay. So they set up, I think it was like 50 cots in there. They had a shower set up outside. And we did this with the fire department and the police department in town. And so that we were open to it. I don't think they had to use it, but that's what it was open for. It was only open for that. So yeah, I mean, that's it.
I heard about that and I was like, I have to put that in. Like I have to find a way to put that in there.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, when did you guys, like, since you guys opened up, right? How did that work? Like, did you have like, how did you minimize, how did you put in place like the social distancing and stuff? Like, how did you go about, you guys were open, and how did that work for like the entire church body?
Yeah. So we went from full capacity where we could seat 400 plus people every service on a Sunday to, I think we started at 25%. So we made sure that all of the rows were 6 feet apart. So there was a lot of space between chairs. If you like, we also had this thing where we had these pieces of paper that were laminated with an X. And so if you came with your family, like you had, let's say you had a family of 4. So you got to sit with we had ushers who would usher them in, and they would sit down, those 4, and then they would put 2 X's so that no one would sit next to them. So then you could seat another 4, another 2, or whatever. People were also registering online to come to service. So when we were full, we were full. We also, everyone had to wear a mask during service, which a lot of people did not like that. But we also went to streaming online. So since we were already streaming online, this helped those people who didn't want to come to church in person. They were able to watch service and experience service from home. So we went live on YouTube, live on Facebook. We also have a platform called Church Online, which allowed people to view it, also chat, and we had a host in there as well. I mean, that was it. We did 12 feet from the stage to the first row. And then every row had 6 feet in between it. So we went, I think it put us either at 25 or 50% capacity. I mean, it really narrowed down the number of people that could be there. People were asked to keep their masks on. We're a very, Brownsville, the Rio Grande Valley is very, very touchy. Like we all hug each other and we shake hands and we fist bump. We do all those things already. So we had to ask people not to do that. So we went from shaking hands and hugging and saying hello to saying, I love you. They would say like, hey, give everybody an I love you, and that was how we did that. But we did masks, we had hand sanitizer everywhere. We had people who cleaned in between services. So we had what we called our clean team. So when the service was over, we had, I think it was like 6 to 8 people, maybe even more, who wiped down every single chair with an antibacterial of some sort. The bathrooms were wiped down again in between. The children's wing was wiped down again in between. And then the next week, everything was deep cleaned as well for the following week. So.
And thank you for saying. And how did? I remember this, but I wanted to ask you because it was a scary time. So, do you remember that I think it was like 2020, obviously, right? Duh. But I meant like in July, how there was like a hurricane. Like, how did that affect, I guess, church? Like, did you guys have service? Did you not have service? And were you able? How did that work for you guys?
I don't remember. I don't remember. I mean, I'm sure the only thing we didn't have was water because everyone had already bought it all. No, I don't even remember. There was a hurricane in July.
I think it had hit up north, but we got like the aftermath of it. If you don't remember, if I'll be here, I could just like answer the question.
I don't remember. I think we had church. I'm pretty sure did we have church? I think we had church.
I
don't think we had church if that's the case. I'd have to know. Obviously, hurricanes didn't matter during COVID. COVID was bigger than the hurricane.
Well, thank you. And is there anything you'd like to add? Because you answered all the questions already. Is there anything you'd like to add, like just like to share, like about the BCF community, or anything like to put in, or anything else you'd like to talk about, basically?
I will say that I think just the church community in general in Brownsville was very helpful during COVID. We had in our church, we had a man who was bringing boxes of food from San Antonio. And so we would have food drives where people could come and literally like no contact, like you open the trunk of your car and we put a box of food in your trunk, and I saw that everywhere here. And I thought that was awesome. That was something that our church did. And our people were so willing to step out of their comfort zone, wear a mask and be outside and do this to help our community. That was super cool. I loved that we were able to offer our church to our first responders and give them a place where they could be sick and keep their family safe if they needed to, or at that time, COVID tests, you couldn't get a response quickly. Now you can. You take a test and within 15 minutes, if you have it or not. That time they were still waiting 2 or 3 days, 4 days before they could get a response. Everyone was, we probably had like maybe 1 or 2 complaints about having to wear their mask during service. And I just love the way that people protected each other, especially in our church. We have older people, we have immunocompromised people. No one looked at you funny if you were there wearing your mask, and no one judged you if you went to church in person or you saw it online. Our pastor, volunteered himself for a trial of the Moderna vaccine. And he did it not for him, but for his church family, so that he could say, hey, I've done this vaccine. Hey, I trust this. And I want you to trust it too, And so for most of it, and everybody on staff for the most part, got the Moderna vaccine because we trusted it, So it was just really cool to kind of see everybody come together. It's just, here we are in 2022, and we had our very first big event on Good Friday. We did a fish fry, and it was really cool to see people come back to serve, people who hadn't been to church in a while. because they've been watching online. They're like, no, I'm back. I'm back and I'm going to start serving again. And I want to help be a part of this community outreach. And we fed, I think, like anywhere between 500 and 700 people on Friday, on Good Friday. And it was just good to see faces we hadn't seen in a long time. So I think our community is starting to come out of being fearful. And I think that's just because, there's so many churches in Brownsville. And honestly, I'm always surprised at how many there are: Catholic, Christian, Baptist, whatever. I just think the community is great here. And they're just so willing to do whatever needs to be done and help each other out, and I don't know, I think it's cool.
Thank you for sharing. This next section is going to cover more like, I guess, you working at the church more than volunteering and stuff. And so at the time of the like during the first wave, you mentioned you were a receptionist, and you were, so like, was there a job change throughout the pandemic, and how did that, I guess, affect your workload and affect like how you juggled everything, I guess?
Luckily, our church is very mainstream. Like, we've crossed over into using the internet for everything, and at that time most of us were young enough to figure out Zoom and figure out Teams and figure out Google Docs and, all that kind of stuff. We already had a way to access our servers from home, for all the stuff that was going on at work. So it didn't, workload wise, it didn't really affect me. I just answered the phone from home. But I was still able to take prayer requests from people. I was still able to have conversations with people over the phone. I was still able to Zoom call with people that we needed to check on, see how they were doing. I was able to do the shopping we needed for church, because I could order everything online, and we could have someone pick it up or, and deliver it. But we didn't need to do any of that for so long when we were shut down. So it was just a matter of really watching out for one another and taking care of each other. But it didn't really affect my workload per se. I think it affected my personal person a little bit, just because of the stress of, oh, I hope no one gets sick, like we're worried about people, like that kind of thing. But I don't think it affected my workload too much.
Thank you. Oh no, I added a question to top of this to be on here. Oops. Okay. Cut. Oops. Okay. I guess I can message. Again, like, if you don't feel comfortable answering, that's totally okay. Since you were a staff member, how did you mentioned that, like, since people weren't coming to church and like there was no, I guess, money coming in, how did I guess COVID financially affect, the church in general? Like, was anyone let go? Was there job changes throughout? Like, did someone go from one position to another? Like, how did that all affect the church offices, basically?
It was actually really cool to see God provide. God provided for everyone. We didn't have to fire anyone. We didn't have to let anyone go. The government offered some grants that helped take care of things. So that kept us afloat because, we still had to pay the light bill, and we still had to pay the internet bill, and we still had to pay those kinds of things. So God really, really took care of us. We did, no one had to be let go. No one didn't get paid. People were still giving because we were still doing work online, and people saw that they wanted to have church available to them online. We didn't have to beg anybody for money. We didn't have to, it was really cool. Like I said, just to see God come through in that. Even people were watching us from other states, and people were giving, so.
That's super cool. Thank you for sharing. Moving on, I guess, so we covered everything. Thank you for sharing. these final questions are just, I guess, are there any just like, oh my gosh, I can't talk. I'm so sorry. This last section just covers like things about like the government officials, like whether it's local, state, or national. You don't have to respond to any of these questions. If you want, you could just, but do you feel satisfied by the local response to COVID-19 in the Brownsville area and stuff like that over these last couple of years?
I think they did the best that they could. I think they did the best that they could. And, we're in the poorest area of the United States. I think they did the best that they could. They gave the information that they could. Our doctors did what they could. Our nurses did what they could. Our hospitals did what they could. Our government officials did what they could. And was some of it extreme? Probably. But like I said, I think they did what they thought needed to be done. And I'm one of those people who like, if this is what my authority says, then I am going to, I'm going to listen to my authority. Overall, God is the authority over them anyway. And so I don't have to worry about that. But I think that they did what they could and what they knew best to do. So.
Thank you. How do you feel about, hold on, trying to find a question hold on. I'm nervous. I got nervous. How do you feel about the national response to COVID-19 led by President Trump in the year 2020, and then President Biden from 2021 to present? Like, how do you feel about the difference, I guess, if that makes any sense?
I don't know. The only thing I remember about Trump was being like, I don't know. He had a lot of words about how it wasn't real. And I remember that. But to me, it was real. And because I had seen people die from it. It wasn't just a bad flu. We knew people who had died. Like I said, I sang at 4 funerals in a span of 10 days. So to me, it was very real. I think that we had a lot of stimulus stuff come through, which I thought was helpful. I think it was a little bit too helpful for some, because there were people who obviously could work but weren't working. I think that some of that should have been, I think that some of that money should have been given more to like places like daycare centers and things like that, so that parents could go to work, because a lot of things were like, we're going to give you the stimulus payment so that because you're not working, so you're at home and you need money to prepare, to take care of your children and take care of your family, and your kids can't go to school, so you can't work. But I feel like if we had maybe put some money into some grant forms of some way to help the community with childcare, or something like that came back in taxes, maybe that says like, if you turn in your paperwork from childcare or whatever, like we'll give you a tax credit or whatever. Like, I think I'm not saying I didn't benefit from the stimulus, because we did. For us, we didn't need the stimulus. It stayed in our savings and we saved it. We didn't even use any of our stimulus money until after all the COVID stuff, not because we didn't need it, but because we were like, well, I'm not going to go buy a new TV. Like, what if somebody gets sick and they can't work, But I don't think everyone did that. And I think, like lots of people shopped with their stimulus money, and it was a big deal. So I feel like as much as Trump wanted to help people, and he did, I think it could have been done. I don't know. I don't know if it could have been done better. He did probably what he thought he could do, and that was throw money at people, you know. and now Biden is like, get your butt back to work. And not that I just think, not that I think Biden's doing a better job, because yeah, there's some things I'm not okay with. There are a lot of things I'm not okay with with our current president, but he is my president. And so it is what it is. I feel like Trump is the one who did everything for COVID, and then Biden came along and was like, okay, we're going to change this and we're going to change that. We're going to change this. And I can't think of anything that I think has been helpful or non-helpful. You think about, and that it'll be controversial, is all the border stuff. We live on a border town, and opening up the borders, which Trump was closing them because of COVID, Biden has wanted to reopen them. I'm taking a lot of classes right now regarding Mexican American history and Spanish, and I've taken, Texas history and all these other history courses, and I've learned a lot about immigration, and it's always been a mess. It's not just because of COVID, like it's always been a mess. And I think this was just another one of those things that made it messier. So I'm not sure how I feel about, I'm not sure how I feel about immigration at this point. Like, I'm not sure how I feel about like keeping people from safety, but I'm also not sure how I feel about keeping us safe. Like, we're going to let all these people from other countries come in. I'm like, okay, test them at the border. Okay, they're going to come in and work. If they're going to work, great. But it's just also, it's been a mess since the very beginning. So nothing, I don't foresee anything changing.
Thank you for sharing.
Sorry.
It's okay. You answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you answered this one. Cool. It's not midterm election. Is it a midterm election this year?
Oh, what?
A midterm election? Is that this year?
I have no idea.
Okay, cool. So ignore that question, I guess. Because it's talking about midterm election, but if neither of us know what it is, then point it out.
I don't know. I don't know what a midterm election is. Now you're gonna make me look it up.
In between. I know it's in between the presidential term, but since Biden was elected last year, no.
Mm-hmm. Midterm elections. It says,
I guess this question pertains to us. I guess if you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer. But do you plan to vote? If so, is the issue of COVID-19 going to factor into your vote during the midterm elections?
I probably will vote. I don't know. Probably. I mean, I guess.
Thank you for answering.
Because when I vote for someone, I mean, I vote based on my values. So,
Makes sense. What impact or purpose do you hope your story may have to listeners of the Voices of Pandemic Digital Archive?
I don't know. I hope people can see that like it was a hard time. The pandemic was a hard time for people, and people died and people were lost and lives were changed. But we're still here. And it's that like, that's that thing that people say at the end of like, but did you die? No, I didn't. I didn't. And so it's been hard. It's been tough. And I know for some, like, it's been really hard. Some people lost their jobs. Some people lost their homes. Some people are still fighting for some of that stuff. But it's not over. Like, life's not over. And there's still so much to be hopeful for, so.
Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to share with me about your experience with COVID-19 that I may not have asked about?
I don't think so.
Well, thank you for your time, Mrs. Galvan. Um, thank you for sharing your stories with me and for for me to use for the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History project.
You're welcome.
And then I can stop recording this, please.